down here we're looking at what if you have 5 client sessions a week and you're realizing $40 each for them. Okay, so that's $200 a week, $10,000 a year. Well, how much are a lot of internships paying? Right? I'm thinking this is right in line with, I mean, every once in a while you hear of a fabulous internship, but most internships don't pay a tremendous amount of money. So,
if they pay it all, they don't pay.
exactly. Or some of them have a stipend. I mean, that's it. So in private practice, if you only have 5 clients and if you're just realizing $40 per session, you're already doing better than most internships. That's my point. Now, a lot of private practice internships, unless you're really cooking, don't generate a lot of hours. So what I did was I did both. You know, as an intern, I did both private practice and I was at JFK Counseling Center, which is an absolute bottomless pit of hours, right? You can get all the hours you want, but you've got to pay to be there. You've got to pay tuition. It was like $650 for every quarter. But I absolutely more than covered all the tuition that I paid at JFK in my private practice with much fewer clients. So I used a few private practice clients to pay for all the hours that I got at JFK Center. And that was a very productive arrangement for me. How many of you are interested in how much money I actually made as an intern? Anybody want to see that? Does anybody not want to see these numbers? Okay, shut your eyes or don't look at your book. So here you go. This is my internings. That's so clever. So I graduated JFK in March 28th of 2011. Okay, that was it. I got my official graduation date, got my shiny diploma 6 months later or so. And but in June of 2011, when I had received my number, my registration number, I began private practice in addition to going to JFK. And look at this first month. Look at that first month. My gross, each one of these, the red is the gross and the blue is what I retain. Now, one thing I should say, underlying all the things we're going to talk about today, is that none of this works if you are not a good therapist. Okay, so, I mean, it doesn't go without saying. I think this goes with saying, is that being a good therapist is the underpinning of everything you're going to do in private practice. If you're really not a very good therapist, you may not want to go into private practice. You might want to stick in institutional practice. Okay? Remember that average, the concept of an average, applies in everything, every field, everywhere you go. That bell curve just rings and rings and rings, right? So the average therapist is average, right? Now most people who really want to go into private practice and do well want to do better than average. Okay, so that's good. The fact that you are here today, the fact that you spent money and time to come here to find out what's going on, indicates you already have a level of initiative and desire that's probably well above the average for people in this business. Okay, so on some level you all presenting yourself as above average. But you need to remember that being a good therapist, we're not going to talk today about how to be a good therapist. We're talking about how to be a good private practice practitioner. Okay? And that's different from being a good therapist. And that's a very important point. And we're going to come back to this in the final thoughts, but here's a teaser for you. You know, the thing is, the skills that make you a good therapist are different from the skills that help you become a therapist. Right? The skills it takes to become a therapist, which is grit and determination and perseverance, those aren't, you don't sit there and grit through with a client and say, I'm really going to make you change today. You know, that's not typically how we really work well in the room, right? But there's a lot of that that's needed to get through everything you have to go through to become a therapist. I am super passionate about being a therapist. I don't know if you can feel this, but I love being a therapist. I totally love it. And I love being in private practice. But these are two loves. Some people say torn between two lovers. I don't know. But it's really, they're two separate pursuits. But the skills that help you become a therapist, those are the skills that will serve you in private practice. The skills that make you a good therapist, that will help your private practice survive. Okay, that will enable your private practice. But what's really going to make your private practice succeed are the skills that you use in becoming a therapist. And so that's an important distinction that not a lot of times people don't think about. So these are interesting numbers. Here you go. There it is. I showed you my numbers. I debated for a while whether I'm going to do this. Talked about it with my wife. Really? Should I do that? Why not? Full disclosure, right? I'm going to be authentic because authenticity is very important. Now, another thing that's really interesting to note in this chart is December of 2012. Look at how close that blue is to the red. Everywhere else, it's not very close, right? Because I'm giving a lot of these fees. You know, everything from the top of the blue to the end of the red in this chart, that all went to my supervisors. That's money my supervisors made, right? In December of 2012 was the first month I was licensed. And look what happened. My earnings, my gross dropped, but what I made increased. You get a big raise when you get licensed if you've established a private practice. That's what happens. That's the real payoff for private practice as an intern. It's right, the day you get, for some people, the day they get licensed, the day they start to approach creating a practice. And, oh my God, now I finally got over that whole licensing thing and now I have another mountain to climb. And that's a tough place to be psychologically. If you've built a private practice already and you've got that moving and going, the day you get your license, you get a raise. You get a big raise right then. I like immediate gratification. That was one of those days. So the next month, suddenly you say, but gee, Howard, what are you talking about? Look at that gap. What's up with that? Well, first I'd like you to notice that the blue thing here is still bigger than the blue thing the previous month, and that gap at that point represents rent I was paying as opposed to fee split. And what happened was in January, which is what that is, of 2013, was the first time I started renting additional space because I was starting to increase my client load and I was taking on more stuff. How much rent was I paying? Well, let's look at the chart. I was paying about $125 there. Here I'm paying like $425 or $500 or so because I rented it 2 extra days in another location. And so at this point, you know, I'm retaining over $2,000 on over $2,500 in earnings on a month, and I'm paying $400 in rent or $500 in a rent. So you're asking, what do you pay for rent? When you're going to start a private practice, you don't, as a licensed person, you don't have to rent the whole week. You don't have to rent a space all the time. You rent a day somewhere. You rent 2 days. When you fill those up, you rent another day. And then someday you get to the point where, oh, if I rent another day, I'm paying as much as I'd be paying to rent an entire office, and then you go rent an office. And that's what happened to me. You know, by July of 2013, I moved into my own office. And that's where I am now, my office in Los Altos. I love my office in Los Altos. Very happy there. So, this makes sense? Is this interesting? Any of you think you cannot do this? Good answer. Because you're all capable of doing this. There's nothing magic about me. I mean, I'm kind of magical. But all I did was I felt most of the time along this way, I felt like I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough to go and get clients. I'm really not doing enough to make this happen. It's not going fast enough. And yet, would any of you be disappointed in these results in your private practice as an intern? It's okay to say yes. There's nothing wrong with having ambition. Just don't let it blind you. You could be flying high. You won't see this one in your little slide packet. There are a few surprise slides in here that you don't have in there. Just to see if we're paying attention. So, and this is a lovely picture. I took this picture from another balloon. That was a very exciting day. You too could have a day like that. So what's your story? Marketing, networking, and money, the big three. I call this the big three. And marketing is hard and time-consuming, and networking is scary, and money denigrates the work. When this becomes about money, I'm not helping someone. We're not really getting to what's going on. I didn't get in this to be about money. I got in this to help people. That's cool. That's good. But does it really denigrate the work? One thing I think denigrates the work is the idea that I'm not worth anything. I'm not worth the money that I should be getting for what I'm doing. If I'm a good therapist, which I need to be a good therapist to go and make this all work, I deserve to be paid as a good therapist. or I can refer them to a mediocre therapist. Ah! So what's your story? What is marketing, networking, and money? Anybody have any story about that?